You are listening to the JJG Podcast. Hey, welcome to the podcast. Week 1, 2022 college football season is now in the books. Besides the game tonight with Clemson versus Georgia Tech, I do expect for Clemson to win that game. Georgia Tech is still having to build that program, and it appears they have a long way to go, so I do expect for Clemson to win that game tonight. But speaking of week 1, we saw some interesting matchups. Even if you go back to week 0, Vanderbilt against Hawaii. It's probably the best I've ever seen Vanderbilt look in a long time. Scored a lot of points, so good for Vanderbilt. Of course, once they get into the SEC play, because they're currently at 2-0, they hadn't really played any conference teams yet, but I'm sure they will play tough. But don't expect to see a lot of wins against a lot of their SEC opponents. But overall, when you look at week 1, some of the teams that certainly want to highlight, first of all, I'm going to call out the Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, wow, what a performance. Oregon comes in ranked number 11. Georgia's former defensive coordinator, Dan Lanning, who is now the head coach at Oregon, comes in with Bo Nix, who is a quarterback that Georgia is very familiar with. And I expected for the game to be much closer. Georgia put on a really nice performance, showed that they do have a passing attack. They did run the ball. Stetson Bennett, he was very poised. I thought he had a really good game. Even they had an opportunity to bring in Carson Beck to get some playing time. So, finishing a game like that, 49-3, said a lot for Georgia. That when Kirby spoke at media days about not being the hunted but doing the hunting, it certainly appears to be that way. And I certainly expect for this Georgia team to continue to improve and improving it better and better, because understanding how, Coach Smart thinks and his expectations and that whole coaching staff expectations and even the players' expectations, I don't see these guys getting complacent. I see them continue to get better and better. And I just got to say, shout out to Malachi Starks. What a great way for a freshman to start off. Hell of an interception also. Georgia is looking good right now. Also, we saw Alabama take on Utah State. I think it was 55-0. Bryce Young. Bryce is the real deal. No ifs and buts about it. So they'll get a test this weekend. They're playing Texas. Expect for Bama to not have any issues in that game either. Auburn played Mercer. Didn't expect for Mercer to put up much of a fight. I thought what was interesting was after the game, they celebrated as if they had won an SEC championship. And I guess sometimes teams will do that when they're trying to provide a lot of support for a coach that may be on the brink of being gone. But they had a big celebration. Also over the weekend, for a lot of people who thought it was a upset, for me, I didn't. Florida beats Utah. And for a lot of people, they consider it to be an upset. For me, I saw it as being a Pac-12 team who won their conference last year. A really good team in the Pac-12. Beat Oregon last year a couple times. But you're coming in to play an SEC team. You're going to the swamp. You're fighting a lot of different conditions that you're not accustomed to. That stadium was rocking, sold out. They're there to support their new head coach, Billy Napier. They wanted to see Anthony Richardson and what this team was going to do, because so many people had projected Utah to win this game. For those of us that understand SEC football and understand the passion, especially trying to play football in that swamp, this is why we had already picked Florida to win the game. So to us, it wasn't a surprise. Now, I will say this. if I'm being completely honest with the way that I feel, Utah beat Utah. Poor play calling, especially at the end of the game, throwing that interception in the end zone. You're going back and look at some of the other just play calling. It was just terrible. Tackling was unacceptable. Is another way to put it. And I understand. You got somebody like Anthony Richardson coming down that field, 6'4", 240 plus pounds. It's like trying to stop a train. And guys were trying to low tackle or tackle him from the side. He wouldn't wrap up or anything like that. And, you know, the game of football is about taking on sizable players. And it seems like during the game that some of these players wanted no part of Anthony Richardson. So he had a really good game. And I think he's going to do very well at Florida. I would like to see how he does against some SEC opponents. And we will get our wish this weekend as the Florida Gators are taking on the Kentucky Wildcats. Earlier in the season, you know, people were picking Kentucky to probably be the second best team in the East. And, you know, all of a sudden with this win over the weekend for Florida, it's changed. Vegas has Florida as a touchdown favorite over Kentucky. So there's a possibility that if the Gators can go in, and it's a home game, they're back at the Swamp, so if they go in and win this weekend, and the next game, what I call a cupcake team, no disrespect, but they'll win that game, and there's a possibility that, you know, by the time they get to Tennessee, they're undefeated. They travel to Tennessee. I know ESPN and some of the other, you know, networks and other writers and what have you have already picked Tennessee to win that game. I'm not so sure. It's been a while since Tennessee's had an opportunity to have a great team to beat the Florida Gators. And I know their offense is going to be potent and good, but do they have enough defense to stop Anthony Richardson, and or can they score enough points to outpace Florida? So time will tell. We'll see how things go. Also, last night I watched an interesting game watching Florida State play LSU. And I was asked over the weekend at an event between FSU, LSU, who was my pick. And I picked FSU to win that game. And the person I was talking to gave me this weird look like, man, how can you pick Florida State to beat LSU? And it was just something about watching FSU that first game. And I saw where their discipline had started to improve. And I think Norvell's a really good coach. And I think with this being Brian Kelly's first game at LSU, I think there's still some wrinkles that has to get worked out. I still think there's some relationship issues within the organization, the team, the coaches, and so forth. So I just felt like that FSU is going to be more organized. So if you watched the game last night, FSU actually played a really good game. And they really should have finished that game probably beating LSU by a couple of scores. And there's still some discipline issues you could see with some of the play calling. Once they recover that fumble on LSU and you're down there to goal line, I didn't understand the quarterback tossing the ball. I mean, I just don't know why you wouldn't just, you know, hold the ball, try to run it in. If you don't get it in, you get your 3 points, you're still going to win the game. So just still, there's some things that they still have to work on. But overall, it's a really good win for Florida State. Energizes that program. They're 2-0. There's an opportunity for them if they continue to get better. I could see them actually maybe beating Florida this year because Florida has to travel to Tallahassee. And there's something about playing in front of your home crowd, especially when it's energized and the fans start to believe. And Florida State does have some playmakers. That's not knocking Florida saying they don't, but Florida State definitely has some playmakers, so that'll be an interesting game. But if you go back and look at, I guess you could say the nightcap, the biggest game of the weekend, the Ohio State Notre Dame game. Really don't know what to make of that game. I expected that Ohio State would cover because the whole summer, all I've heard is how it's Ohio State and Alabama, then the rest of the field. With Georgia coming in at number 3, and Georgia was kind of minimized in that comparison because losing 15 players to the NFL, losing players in the transfer portal, and they just didn't see how Georgia could make that trajectory to be able to compete this season, which I totally disagree with. I just, like I said once again earlier, just knowing the DNA and the understanding of this Georgia football team, they believe and they think they should be, in that conversation. So, I expect for Ohio State to come out Saturday and make a statement. Now, if you listen to the analysts and everyone else, they're going to tell you that Ohio State wasn't really trying to run points up or anything like that. They could have just taken Notre Dame out anytime they wanted to, but they really practiced on that defense, trying to make sure that defense understood how to play good defense, keep Notre Dame, at a minimum score. Well, 3/4 of the game, at least half of the game, Notre Dame was winning 7-3. So, yeah, if you want to say it was a defensive matchup, well, the first half of the defensive matchup, Notre Dame was winning. So you're basically saying that Notre Dame has a pretty decent defense also. And they just couldn't put it together to score. Ohio State did come back third quarter, score some points, and they go on to win the game. For me, I still wasn't that impressed because I've seen top 10 teams play against Notre Dame and hold Notre Dame down to 10 points, 7 points, in that range. And for Ohio State to do that, that's okay. But the scoring piece, I still don't understand it because if Ohio State is this high-power, prolific scoring offense, then you're on a big stage. Why can't you do both? I mean, it's just – now, granted, it was the first game. I'm sure you got to work some things out, but we'll see how things go throughout the season. I think they play Penn State this weekend. We'll see how things go throughout the season. But at the end of the day, I do expect to see either Ohio State's got to improve with their – passing game. I think C.J. Stroud will have to run the ball some. I don't think he needs to be a total running back, but I do think he needs to run the ball some. It was another weird game over the weekend, too. North Carolina played, I think it was Appalachian State, if I'm not mistaken. Man, it was a shootout. Yeah, it was. I mean, the scores were up in the 60s. And I'm sure Mack Brown is nowhere near happy, nor the fans are, with the way that defense was playing. I mean, it's just like, it didn't look like a normal North Carolina defense. And it's hard to imagine that someone's going to put up that kind of points, on North Carolina, especially that particular team. Like, so I was shocked. I mean, sometimes shootouts are fun. But it also, means that where's your defense? And, to have a score of 63-61, that tells you that North Carolina can score, but man, their defense has got some work to do. So looking at this upcoming weekend, one of the games that are standing out, like I said, it's not going to be a must-see game. In my opinion, it's going to be Alabama, Texas. Like I said, I do expect for Alabama to win that game. I think Texas still got a long road to travel. Oklahoma looked good over the weekend. It'll be interesting to see how well they perform as they get into more competitive games. I think the biggest game that's coming up this weekend will probably be the Florida-Kentucky, Alabama, Texas. I know Georgia plays Stanford this weekend. I think they'll give the Bulldogs opportunity to get some more younger players in the games, get them more experience and so forth to get ready for South Carolina next week. South Carolina game next week's a noon game. I hate noon games. I just, they're so hard to prepare and get energized for. That can work good and bad in some cases. I just don't like when Georgia plays noon games. And also, I just don't like if Georgia has to play on CBS. I'm not a fan of the CBS network. I don't like any SEC teams playing on CBS, which that'll probably change in a couple more years. Yeah, Georgia's got to be prepared for that game. One thing is that you have to prepare for every game like it's, the most important game you've ever played. You can't just walk in thinking that, okay, this team lost to this team, they're going to be a pushover. That's just not how it works. Upsets happen all the time. If you don't come in prepared and you're playing, South Carolina's going to be at home. They'll be pumped. They're playing the number, depending on what AP poll says, number 2 or number 3 team, in the nation. So if they can knock off with Georgia, it's going to give them a lot of momentum going forward. And if you're Georgia, you can't afford to lose the game. You can lose it and still, win out, but you have to at that point. And then you still would have to win the SEC championship if you have any hopes of getting back in the playoffs. So I think Georgia will be very well prepared. I think they will be well focused to go in and take care of business. I am interested in seeing a little bit of the Pittsburgh-Tennessee game. I watched Pittsburgh play last week against West Virginia. I think Tennessee's going to win that game. And I think they're going to win it with no issues. I really do. I just think they're a much better team than Pittsburgh, but I could be wrong. We'll see. If they do, they'll definitely put them in the rankings. And one last thing is that Texas A&M, I thought they struggled a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of talent on that team. And I think they'll eventually get it right. But, you got to get it right before you start playing some of these SEC opponents. And, man, I'll tell you, I don't know how much of a chance they're going to have against Alabama this year. I mean, unless something changes drastically in the upcoming weeks, man, Alabama may steamroll that game. So, hopefully Jimbo's getting his team together and they're trying to get everything figured out. But it was just great to have week 1 of college football. Like I said, there was week 0. I watched a little bit of that, but you started to get more games week 1, week 2. We're back. I mean, college football is back. I enjoyed week 1. Looking forward to week 2, and we will talk to you then. Take care.